Start the recording and we'll get started. Welcome all. Thank you for being here. I'm Wendy Goldberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Trifaith Initiative, and I'm so grateful that you're all here today. Welcome near and far. We have so many people who have joined us today who represent the rich history that this initiative has called people together around. And so what an exciting moment for us to honor our ongoing relationship with the Episcopal Diocese of Nebraska and their leaders in many capacities. We'll today have an opportunity to hear about the individual journeys of Bishop Barker and Reverend Keith Winton and Camille Culp, who have been integral parts of the Trifaith Initiative since its origin. And the thing that I'd like to set the stage with is to acknowledge that we are in the middle of a shift in terms of our relationship with the Episcopal Diocese. We honor that they were a founding partner and that their part of our story would be incomplete without them. And at the same time, their grace to step aside and make a space for Countryside Community Church to become the Christian partner. We'll learn more about that journey today, past, present, and future. And that I want to set the stage for you all to realize that we don't have answers to the questions that we're going to ask today. And today is intended as a moment to dream about what might be, not to acknowledge what is. And so if any of the ideas that come up today will help many of the board representatives that are here and those who listen on later to help us to create a strategic vision for what new supportive partners beyond the founding partners can look like in our initiative. And this conversation is to help us gain perspective of what that might mean at the diocese level, at the parish level, and individuals level, in terms of their hopes and dreams for being part of the work that we have in terms of our shared common action and our ways to move our mission forward collectively to impact what happens at 132nd and Pacific Street on the Trifaith Commons and beyond, right? And so as we are an example in the work that we do here between the member congregations and then in Omaha, in other states or other countries, how might we all learn both through our co-location and through being a community partner. And so I'm certain that today's conversation will be a beautiful one, as our relationship has been for more than a decade. So with that, I will introduce each of them and help them and ask them to introduce some about themselves. But we'll start with you, Bishop Barker. If you could tell us your role and help people to understand what that potentially means in the diocese, and then how you first heard about the Trifaith Initiative.
Sure. First, let me say thanks to you, Wendy, and to the larger leadership of Trifaith. It's a great privilege to have played a small part in all that has come to pass, and I am so enthusiastic about the possibilities for the future. So just a great grace to be with you today, and to have been part of this journey all the way along. So my name is Scott Barker. I'm a native Omahan. I grew up in the Dundee area, went to public schools throughout, and I'm a lifelong Episcopalian, and I'm now the Bishop of the Episcopal Church for the Diocese of Nebraska, which is our whole state of Nebraska, 52 worshiping communities from Falls City all the way out to Chadron and everywhere in between. And so I'm the chief pastor and the administrator for the diocese, and I help care for all of those churches, far-flung and beautiful as they are. And like every pastor and probably every professional in the world, I'm also trying to learn everything anew in this strange moment of dealing with and living in a global pandemic. I first heard about the Trifaith Initiative about 10 years ago when I was briefly not in Nebraska. I was a pastor at a church in the Diocese of New York, and I was involved in the discernment about who the next Bishop of Nebraska might be. And as the people of the Diocese of Nebraska began to represent to the candidates for Bishop, what they were especially excited about and feeling passionate about here in this place. One of the things that quickly became clear was that the commitment to the Tri-Faith Initiative on the part of the Episcopal Church and Nebraska Episcopalians throughout the state was really deep. And there was just a great sense of excitement about the invitation that had been extended to the diocese to be an early partner, the fact that the diocese chose to accept. And so I learned about this ministry, I would call it, as part of learning about the description of the job that I have now come to inhabit.
Thank you. Reverend Winton, if we could move to you next, and if you could tell your connection as well as the first time that you heard about the Tri-Faith Initiative.
Sure, thanks. Reverend Keith Winton, I am an assistant priest at All Saints Episcopal Church in Omaha. It's at 93rd and Blondo. And I am a fairly new priest, a second career priest. I have been a priest for about 18 months or so. And before that, my home parish here in Omaha for 25 years, and 3 other parishes that I sort of did internships along the way of becoming a priest, and then the church I'm at now. All 4 of those parishes were keenly interested in and had huge supporters of the Tri-Faith Initiative. So from its earliest inception, I was surrounded by people who were so excited by its vision for working together, for its vision for communicating the message of peace, for its intention to be a light in a world that desperately needs it. So I was, as I said, just completely surrounded by folks who were involved from the very beginning, and couldn't help but become interested and excited about it. And I actually think almost every one of those 4 parishes has someone here on this call still. So I'm thankful for all of that work that so many of them put in.
And your home connection?
My wife Lisa has been involved from the beginning for many years with the Tri-Faith organization overall through her work, and also I think most heavily with the Muslim component. And so I learned even more from her.
Right. Well, we would need to mention Lisa Winton as a superstar in the work that has been done to further our success. So certainly a shout out to Lisa and any influence you had on adding to the diocese's enthusiasm for the work. So thank you for adding that. Last but certainly not least, Camille Culp is here today representing parishioners within the Episcopal Diocese. And tell us when you first heard about Tri-Faith, Camille.
As a lifelong Episcopalian, but not from Nebraska, however, I've lived here quite a while, the Tri-Faith Board was having a board meeting at my church, St. Andrew's Episcopal at 84th and Pacific. And any parishioners who were interested could go. I went, I heard. I think my overwhelming memory of the entire experience is that day when I said to myself, I can't not do this.
I have some really fond memories in our shared work with Nancy Kirk. So she would be another heavenly memory. May her memory be a blessing, and all of her contributions for her love for the Episcopal Church and her leadership in the early days as our first executive director. So
she told us in Sunday school one day that she was applying for the job and how excited she would be to have it.
Yeah. Thank you. Just wanted to call her into this space and this memory also, because certainly her love for all people, for all humanity, really I have some beautiful memories of. So tell me, Bishop Barker, what you're applying for the job. They tell you this is an important part of the gig. What about this work attracts you to this cause, to this work?
So three things come to mind. One I already referenced. I was so impressed that with the excitement about this work that was evidenced in the parishes and people of greater Nebraska. That was a surprise to me, that people in our small churches in central and western Nebraska, many of whom live in communities where there's no meaningful interreligious presence. There's probably not a synagogue, there's probably not a mosque, and yet there was something about their sense of identity as Episcopalians and as Christians that said, we want to figure out a way to be in relationship with people from other religious traditions and working together. That was frankly a surprise, especially coming from those often politically conservative communities in greater Nebraska, and it really intrigued me, and it seemed super appealing. And then the other thing that quickly became clear to me and made it easy to jump in with both feet and say yes to the invitation to participate in the work of Tri-Faith was the clear commitment that all the faith partners had at the very beginning, that we were going to be able to fully live into the best expression of our own faith traditions, and that there was no sense that we would have to surrender any part of our identity, our aspirations as people of faith, our traditions, but rather we were going to find a way to fully express, share, celebrate what's unique and wonderful of the Christian tradition, the Muslim tradition, the Jewish tradition, and somehow co-locate to one place and be great neighbors. And I think in my experience, sometimes interreligious efforts fail because you're always seeking out a sense of like, well, what do we share in common? Let's not talk about the differences. Let's emphasize what's the same. And there was a fearlessness from the very beginning in the Tri-Faith that we were going to be okay with the differences and just acknowledge that in some ways there'd be things we would never share, and that even that could be celebrated and could be a distinct part of this work. And when it was clear that was part of what was going on, I was in.
And I'd like to second that from the parish perspective. I think it's always been clear to me that deep spirituality happens in concrete ways, in specific ways, not in generic kinds of ways. And so for a parish to know that that the things that it holds most dear in its tradition are not being asked to be watered down, but are asked just to be communicated and celebrated along with other people's sort of equally ancient and wonderful perspectives and traditions makes it possible, I think, in a way that trying to, as Bishop Barker said, trying to come up with just some sort of wishy-washy, generic, optimistic kind of thing, it ends up not being able to live. There's no spirit there. The spirit is always concrete, I guess, which is a really weird thing to say, but I think it's somehow true.
And is that what attracted you to the cause?
Yes, definitely. That was one of the key aspects for me personally too.
Thank you. How about you, Camille? Well,
I have been the other in a couple of times in my life that were very benign and non-threatening. I often joke about having lived in Utah, and one is very definitely the other there. And so when I heard about what was going on, I felt like I needed to do what I could to promote this kind of interaction.
Thank you. We'll go backwards this time. Camille, I'll start with you. And you start to mention this in your last response, but what life experiences do you feel have prepared you to do this work?
Well, I haven't lived quite a few different places, almost all in the United States. And I feel like growing up, I was told I could be anything I want to be, and I didn't have any real strong ideas. My sister wanted to be a horse, but I never felt like my family or my religion boxed me in at all. And so as I moved around and saw the different things that were going on, somehow this just really struck a chord with me.
Thank you. Reverend Winton?
Well, I grew up in a part of Indiana that is not necessarily known for being accepting and open-minded, generally speaking. And after I moved away from there, I moved to Chicago and encountered friends that I became very deep friends with for the first time in my life who were Jewish. Probably the first time in my life I ever met someone who was Jewish. That was just not part of the where I grew up. Became very deep friends, and then I happened to be a singer as well, and I got a job as a singer at a synagogue, and fell in love with both the similarities and the differences in our liturgies, in our way of worship, in our way of seeing the world, and those deep friendships really forged in me a passion for the kind of work that Tri-Faith is doing to really foster deep friendships among people who might otherwise view themselves as the other, as Camille said.
Thank you. I just need to ask the question. I didn't put this on your pre-list of questions, Keith, but I'm going to go there. Second career.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a big deal. Tell us about your first career and the shift, the why. Are you still glad you did it?
Oh, okay. Well, some of those are really, yeah. So of course,
inquiring minds want to know.
Because it's also new. I'm still in the honeymoon phase,
Nice.
So it's just fantastic. My first career, I was a software engineer, and I had my own company for a long time. And in undergrad, I double majored in both theology and math. So I always knew that I had sort of the voice of the Spirit speaking to me. I just wasn't ready. It wasn't the right time. I might have done great damage to myself and other people, I think, had I gone straight into that. So, several years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, the nagging voice of the Spirit was something I couldn't say no to anymore, and so I started on the sort of the journey of training and education and internships and all that's entailed in doing that kind of career shift. And my wife Lisa and my family were infinitely patient with the crazy things and crazy hours I put in to make that happen. And it has been a never look back for 1 minute joyful kind of experience ever since.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Bishop Barker, tell us about your life experiences that prepared you both to be in the role that you're in and to have an appreciation for why you want the diocese to be part of this.
Sure. But let me say that I was rector of a church where Keith was of my priestly ministry. And for those of us who've known Keith forever, it is no surprise that this is where he's ended up. It's an incredible blessing and a grace that he answered the call of the Spirit and is doing what he's doing. In terms of my experiences, I understand the Christian journey of discipleship and following Jesus to be partly about the pattern of turning away from what's sinful and broken in your life and turning towards what's life-giving and who God created and called you to be. The truth about my upbringing is that I was in an immensely loving Omaha community, but in some ways that might be akin to the Indiana home that Father Keith described. There was around me cat and anti-Semitic ways part of the air that I breathed. And though good people in my life pressed against that, and that wasn't the only experience of growing up in this community, it was a significant one and it shaped me. And at some point in my young adulthood, my understanding of the invitation of Jesus to love every single human being as if they were, because they are, created in the image of God. And even to seek out the person of Jesus himself in the other, especially the other who maybe challenges you and makes you to grow. Like that I saw that meant for me that there was an extraordinary opportunity to mend some fences, to repent of some things in my life and some patterns of living that I had that were about ignorance mostly, and to figure out a way to live into deeper relationship with people from other faith communities, precisely because that's who Jesus calls me to be as a Christian. So that was a big piece. And as for what shaped me to enter the career that I have embraced, that's a big question for sure, as it was for Father Keith, I think, as it is for every Christian, because we're all in ministry one way or another. But I've had a certain amount of tragedy in my life, and from that I learned to turn to God in a way that was saving for me, and that's something that I have experienced deeply and want to share with other people. And Nebraska is just my home in the deepest imaginable way, and it always has been, no matter where I've lived in the world. And so here, for the last chapter of my professional life, when I got an invitation to come back with the people I know and love the best and try to serve them, there's no way I could have said no. And as with Father Keith, it's been super challenging, but it's also been the fulfillment of everything I might have hoped for professionally and personally. It's such a grace to be the Bishop of Nebraska.
Thank you. Thank you all. So this is an open question. Any of you three panelists are welcome to answer, but give us all a framework of understanding that our partner in Countryside Community Church is of the United Church of Christ, which is a progressive denomination of Christianity. And you all are here representing the Episcopal Diocese. Give us some, understanding that I'm asking, 5 minutes, not an hour and a half of theology, so in a 5-minute kind of version, help us to understand the denomination, the theology, the kind of ritual and cultural separations and and commonalities between the denominations, and where do the puzzle pieces fit together, and where do we need to again celebrate what is different?
Well, I'll try. Maybe that will take some heat off Bishop Barker, and then he can just correct me instead of sticking his own neck out. So for those of you who are not Christians, the first thing that must be said is it is a sad wound for all of us that our divisions are so deep sometimes, and that we are so fractured. So that everything I say, you sort of hear through that lens, that it's that any differences that people try and make beelines in the sand are wounds, really, scars that need to be healed. We're part of the Worldwide Anglican Church, so Church of England, and we have generally speaking, a very broad and sort of accepting perspective. Our focus is on the universal love of God in creation, for all of creation and all people. And we are very keen for our own traditions. We tend to be a very traditional looking church, and we in the Reformation, when the first splintering of Christianity happened, there were many, 2 or 3 or 4 different key kind of splinterings that happened in Europe, and a lot of those had all of them essentially had just as many, if not more, political and power kind of reasons as they did theological. In the Church of England, it was most all of it was about sort of authority and power, and so the Church of England broke away from the control of Rome, but not from very much of the ritual or the ceremony. So an Episcopal church would look very much like a Roman Catholic church. The worship would look very much like that. But in our broad understanding of God's love and acceptance, we ordain women, we ordain people of all sexual orientations. Everyone is welcome. There is not necessarily a particular set of specific beliefs you have to have. We welcome everyone, regardless of where they are in their faith journey, kind of. The key differences between us and Countryside, many of them would be sort of in the shape of our worship, whereas ours looks very sort of Roman Catholic with much ceremony. Theirs would have significantly less ceremony. And in our sort of managerial structure, if you will, we have what we consider to be sort of one of the most ancient forms of church governance, where all of us report to the bishop, and the bishop sort of has the ultimate authority over things that happen inside that bishop's jurisdiction, and then all the bishops together collegially then work together, but they can't tell each other what to do necessarily. And we have, on the other hand, being the American branch of the Anglican Church, we're a very democratic form as well, because every 3 years, all of the bishops and all of the priests and a whole set of lay people get together for what they say is the largest democratic gathering in the world, and they have a 10-day enormous conference with thousands of people who decide together what direction the church will be going, and what changes, if any, need to be made in our polity and our worship, etc. So we're much more structured, perhaps, but not enormously hierarchical on a local level, which gives us a lot of differences as well in different parts of the country. How's that?
Bishop
Superior.
Barker, what do you think?
I think he passed with flying colors. Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to, I understand the Episcopal Church to be really centered on the person of Jesus. And we often say we're the incarnation people. We really make it a point to celebrate that in Jesus, God becomes human, and that an intimate relationship with God is possible in a really extraordinary way because Jesus is human. So I would say Jesus-centered, most of the ways in which we're progressive are ways that are meant to expand the boundaries of the church, to take down walls that would separate other people, and to make sure that everybody is equally invited to the table and able to participate in the love that's manifest in the person of Jesus through the sacraments of the church. We're definitely tethered to ancient patterns of worship. That's a big thing. And, a visit to an Episcopal church on a given Sunday morning might look very different in very different places, but almost certainly part of the experience is going to be participating in prayer and worship that are part of very ancient patterns of what the gathered Christian community looks like on the Sabbath morning. And then the last thing I'd say, and I think Father Keith touched on this too, is I think the Episcopal Church means to be really attuned to the person of God that is the Holy Spirit, and faithful to and confident in the Spirit's presence in our lives to lead us in the here and now to whatever new thing God is calling the church to do in this moment. We try to be really courageous about embracing the new, following after the person of the Spirit.
I have one way to tie a bow around that. I heard someone say once that there's sort of 3 B's: behave, believe, and belong. And there are some Christian denominations where it's all about the right behavior, and if you don't have the right behavior, you can't join. There are some where it's all about exactly the right beliefs, and if you don't have exactly the right beliefs, you can't join. And in the Episcopal Church says belong. You are beloved by God. Belong. You come pray with us. So we don't have, as I said, we don't have a catechism that you have to, we have a catechism, but it's not something that you must pass and get an A on. And we don't have a very hard and fast set of beliefs. We don't have a very hard and fast set of behavior, because the behavior fundamentally is all about loving God and loving your neighbor, period, as the most difficult kind of rule there possibly could be. But what we say is we are formed together and we are brought together, and we are a people of God together because we pray together. So the one thing that makes us who we are and makes you be part of us is that we pray together. And that's kind of the bar. If you want to come pray with us, you are one of us.
Thank you. It's been my lived experience that sometimes the version of the story that the clergy tell is a little different than the lived experience of the person who's doing the believing and the behaving. So Camille, why would someone join an Episcopal Diocese related church as opposed to the United Church of Christ? What's the on the street answer?
Well, I find that difficult to say because I don't know very much about the UCC. I've only been to a few services. I think that a lot of times it comes down to your personal experience with the church that you're a part of and how welcome you feel there, and that we make it our job to make everyone feel welcome. And some people, it's harder for them to feel welcome than others, but we're trying our best.
Thank you. I remember Woody, who was on our founding board, mentioning many times the conversation around everyone is welcome to take communion at the Episcopal Diocese. What does everyone mean in that definition? All denominations of ecumenical denominations of Christianity, or?
I better jump in front of our priest here. So that is an area of real energy and perhaps change in the Episcopal Church right now. But any allowed to receive communion in an Episcopal Church. The lived reality, however, in many places, and it's really based on our idea that in communion, Jesus is really and truly present. So honestly, in many Episcopal churches, an invitation will be given that's something to the effect of, if you want to be in closer relationship with Jesus, you are welcome at this holy table. The idea being that precisely because Jesus is real and present in the sacrament of communion, no human being dare stand in the way of another human being who desires to draw into closer relationship with him. But that's actually, this is classic Episcopal Church. That's probably common practice in the Episcopal Church right now, but our official polity has not entirely caught up to common practice. And we're a denomination who's okay for the moment living with that kind of tension.
Thank you. So now we'll transition to starting to dream about our relationship together in the future. I think it was important for us to kind of set the table and understand how we got to this place. So the moment that we're at is that the Episcopal Diocese has graced our work with an enormous donation of $500,000 for our Tri-Faith Center, for which we are forever grateful, and will honor that piece of your story and legacy in our founding story and in the building as we figure out how to do signage in general. And towards understanding what that will mean, as I started out saying, we want to dream about what that looks like and what that might be. So from your imagination, how do you hope, I think is the right word, that the diocese will be in relation with these founding partners? I
might share one or two thoughts by way of additionally setting the table. One is to say that I want to make it clear that that donation, which we were so proud to give, was actually the result of an effort to invite individual Episcopalians to donate to the diocese if they wished, so that the diocese could then make a symbolic gift to the Tri-Faith Initiative. So it's important to say that it wasn't somehow a gift from the diocese. It was a gift from the Episcopalians who live here in Nebraska and believe in the work of the Tri-Faith. I'm even prouder of that reality than the substantial investment we made as a diocese, as an institution earlier on, because that came from the coffers of the church. But this latest gift comes from human beings who believe in this work and love it. To me, it seemed very clear when I first became bishop and began working with the Tri-Faith that it needed to begin with three distinct faith communities, three congregations. And one of the challenges that attended to the diocese being a partner was that the diocese isn't a congregation, we're something altogether different. And the fact that we didn't have a fully operational and large Episcopal congregation to be in relationship with the folks from Temple Israel and the Institute made it difficult for us to participate I think in the deepest possible way in this work. And it's one of the reasons that it felt right to hand the torch off to a congregation. But it was also clear from the very beginning that this would be, if it fully lived into its potential and its vision, it would be much more than just the relationships between three worshiping congregations. It would be a witness to the larger world about the possibility for interfaith relationships that needed to somehow be amplified. So to me, part of what's going on with the Episcopal Diocese vis-a-vis Tri-Faith right now is you're at the place where the three congregations are thriving. The relationships between them couldn't be more intimate and deep. You've really achieved a measure of success that we were only dreaming of a decade ago. Now, how can the rest of the local community, and especially the faith community, somehow join in to the relationships of those worshiping communities to amplify, to multiply, and to celebrate this incredible thing that already exists between the three individual faith groups and now might be shared with the wider world?
We should take a video of that. That was beautiful. Thank you. I share so much of the sentiment that you added. Keith or Camille, what next? What's a win look like?
That's something that I wonder for myself. What is it that I could do? How could I become involved? I have to say that I haven't participated in as many of the wonderful Tri-Faith opportunities that have been offered this pandemic season, where I wouldn't even have to leave my house. But maybe that's the way, is in the programming, participating on different levels of the programming, just being a member, maybe presenting whatever comes up.
Please feel welcome always. Spread the word. Bring a friend. Yes. Keith, how about from the parish level?
The thing that I think is most exciting is to dream, and at this point it's it's just the beginnings of dreaming, so not very concrete, but to dream about the ways to join into the synergy that's part of Tri-Faith already, and make it a larger ripple together. So specifically things like expanding the circles, starting with individual parishes, but including other, using what we might do as the model for other Christian groups as well, not just Episcopalians. But how can we find synergies among our youth? Obviously, young people have a passion for social justice and a passion for cooperation, I think, and for their dreams about changing the world into a better place. How can we leverage that together and make it ever more larger. And then I think there are just obvious low-hanging fruit things like continuing to expand on the great work that Tri-Faith and the communities are already doing in mutual understanding and education and fellowship activities, to expand those more broadly into parishes, in tendrils into all the rest of the community of Omaha, and make Omaha even more of a vibrant and accepting and exciting community than it is now.
Thank you. So one of the things that is maybe even surprising to me on some days is how different and ever present the culture of each of the Temple, Countryside, and AMI's communities are, and how much appreciation we need to have for the autonomy of that culture, and it kind of referencing back to Bishop Barker's statements about honoring our differences and knowing that we intend to keep each congregation whole. How do you think this exploration of a relationship between additional parishes, affiliates of the Tri-Faith Initiative, those who on a diocese, congregational, or individual level may want to uplift this mission work, how do you imagine that to, how might we need to keep in mind the culture of your congregations as they exist? And how might this even exploration change or shift the cultures, or unsettle or disrupt, right? So that.
Well, I might sort of first kind of flip that question maybe on its side and come at it from a different perspective. I think those of us who hope to do that need to be coming with a very significant amount of humility, just in the sense that the effort, the time, the blood, sweat, and tears that has been put into getting the Tri-Faith organization and the congregations to where they are now, we have much to learn from that. So I think, coming in from a perspective of humility from anyone who wants to sort of join in this effort, I think is one of the key things that we should all have in our vision.
I might add to that. In all three of the Abrahamic faith traditions, there's an emphasis on pilgrimage as one way to live into faith life, and part of the way I have always understood the power of ground on which these communities dwell, and it's a place to which human beings can journey. I know that part of the thinking of the Episcopal Church in offering that donation from those great Episcopalians in this moment was that was to help complete the fourth building that might very well be the primary pilgrimage site for people who want to come to this sacred place and have some experience of what the three congregations have to offer. So part of what I wonder is, because the congregations are distinct, living communities that are charged with caring for one another and doing their own version of ministry in the world. I'm not sure that they're going to be equipped to be the tri-faith for the world. Whatever happens in that fourth building, whether it's a place that's we journey to, whether it's a place in humility, as Father Keith suggested, whether it's a place that offers programming to help educate and change folks who have a heart for this kind of ministry, whether it's a place from which important social witness emanates to change our community and our world. I'm just excited about the idea that there's going to be a place to go where this ministry happens that flows from the individual faith communities, but doesn't put it all on them to be doing this for the world, if that makes sense.
And your perception then of your followers to come to this space. Tell us about, one of the board members and I were having a conversation about like, what are the products of the Tri-Faith Initiative? How do we serve? And certainly one of those is to document the process by which we enter a relationship with each other, and to create a toolkit so that others can replicate that. So coming to learn about our collaborative model, to witness the experiment that's happening at 132nd, but in what hopes do you see being part of that has benefit back to your movement, to your denomination?
I'm not sure if this story fits in, but when we were still drumming up inspiration from others, Father Tim, Kareem Kayati, and I went to Mitchell, Nebraska to give a talk. And I was chatting with one of the ladies after the talk, as we were eating, and she said, well, I just don't know anybody that's not Christian. And then she said, oh, wait a minute. I have a doctor, new in town. By his last name, I'm guessing that he's Muslim. She says, I'm going to talk to him.
An invitation in. Yeah. Other benefits?
Well, to stick with my theme of pilgrimage, I have made a couple of pilgrimages in my life, but most meaningfully, I walked the Camino de Santiago, which is an ancient Christian trail that goes to the alleged tomb of Jesus' brother, St. James, in northern Spain. And, you know, it's important that I say alleged, because that experience changed my life. It really shaped me as much as many other things that I've engaged with as a Christian. But ultimately, it was about opening oneself up to the experience of being with people on the journey and approaching the relics at the pilgrimage site with a sense of awe and prayerfulness and openness to whatever that is and whatever might be there. It strikes me that the Tri-Faith could be that. There could be a place that beckons human beings to journey here in a prayerful and humble attitude with an open heart and mind to whatever experience God has for us in that place. Trusting that the experience that we would receive would be grounded in the relationships and the ministries of these three communities who were living authentic, deeply faithful lives in their own traditions and loving one another in the most powerful and sacrificial way. How could you miss by making a journey to such a place and being open to whatever experience might be offered?
Thank you. I invite anyone to offer some questions in the chat. I'm glad to read them aloud if you have additional. Well, perhaps Keith, it looks as if you have something to add.
I just want to say one more thing from a sort of a parish level, but it's much bigger. I suppose it goes without saying, but I think it needs to be articulated. There are so many forces at work right now, so many forces of darkness really trying to get us to turn everyone else into the other, to dehumanize people, because you can treat people, you can do anything you want to someone if you dehumanize them. And there are so many forces in every direction pulling us those ways, that I think it is our mission, all of us jointly, to counteract those forces. And anything that we do that can bring people together who are different in so many possible ways, but consciously working together to recognize the humanity and the image of God in each other. We have to be doing that. That is our fundamental job, I think, right now, especially. And so I think for us and for the three of you who are already in the Tri-Faith, everything we can do together to expand that ripple is our primary job.
Thank you. And amen. James asks us all this question. First, to honor, thank you for the deeply inspirational testimonies from you as panelists. But to ask the question back then, how might Tri-Faith demonstrate an outpouring of this expression of love back to your community and to the broader community? And what vision do you have for that?
Well, Wendy, I want to thank you and say that your tenure so far in helping to lead this organization has been an embodiment of what I would have hoped for. Omaha has not had a really thoroughgoing way to organize interfaith ministry in a long time. And as I have watched you step into your new role, I have seen a person who is fiercely committed to the idea that we can do more together. And you have really generously thrown open the doors to help bring the multitude of faith groups that are represented in this great city together to do good things. Starting with just getting to know one another and providing spaces for conversation where we can be who we are. And if Tri-Faith is making that happen, that's a huge gift to people of faith and to the larger community. So thank you, and you're doing it, I think.
Thank you for your kindness. It is truly a privilege to have been on this journey with so many here today. Bob Freeman's on the call, Woody Bradford's on the call. The relationships that we have been able to form are profound and have changed me forever as a person, certainly. And this concept that you're noting and that Beth is noting in terms of all of our pilgrimage to experience this time to get to this moment and where it will take us next, begs the question, how do we move this from a movement that has been inspired by a few really well-intentioned people with the right head and the right heart and the right connections and the funding to be able to make this dream possible. But in order for the next chapter to work, it has to be accessible to people beyond the leadership, beyond the spiritual leaders and beyond the community leaders who have gotten us to 2020. The next chapter of the Tri-Faith Initiative will happen one relationship at a time. And I believe that with all of my heart and soul. And it will not only take all of us showing up, but as Beth exhibited in her notes to us in the chat, it will require that we bring a friend. And so for me, the concept of inviting the Episcopal Diocese in is literally that. It's on a larger scale, but I just want to bring a friend back, right? I just want all of you to know that you are deeply our communal friends and that we know we've stood together on this path for a very long time and that we need to be more intentional about phoning you to make sure you know that the next event is happening and that you are welcome at the table. In that heart and spirit, I want to make sure everyone knows about our grand opening celebration, which is on October 17th. It is a virtual grand opening and celebration of two things. First is the beautiful opening of our Tri-Faith Center, this fourth building, the epicenter of where we will come together for this important work, but also of the completion of our mission to co-locate, the success of each of the partner congregations and the Episcopal Diocese joining us to be able to do what everyone said we wouldn't be able to do, and that is this dream to co-locate. So it is a virtual gathering. There is no expense to attend. Man, woman, and child are invited to attend. That we'll start with a half an hour of greetings and tributes and go into an original play that was written by a local playwright about our stories of faith and family. And I hope that in that play you all see some bit of yourself, and then join us for conversations, connecting conversations following that play, to talk like this candidly with each other in small groups about how we might dream to come together to make more people feel the impact that we hope our mission makes Omaha feel and beyond. So that's something we're working very hard on. I know that the invitations were mailed this week, and I hope all of you go to your mailbox today and see an invitation, or certainly watch for a virtual Nice, Bishop Barker got his in the mail today. Fill it out right away. If you're so inclined, there's a celebration box that goes with that. And that just to add to the fun of making us feel that we're all connected a while apart. And finally, to realize that as the Episcopal Diocese has led and shown with their financial support, that our work is not possible without the ongoing support of individuals as well. And so we invite you to become a bridge builder, which is a way for individuals and hopefully other affiliates to be able to show their support for us financially with a reoccurring monthly or annual gift. And so I invite you to look at that very closely and to consider that as an option in your philanthropy in the coming year. So thank you very, very much to our panelists for sharing so freely with us today, for your spirit and for your passion, and probably more than any of those things, for your friendship. So please watch for more programming from TriFaith, and thank you all for joining us today. Take care.